we're going to illustrate the idea of pass-by value within the Java programming language. So to do that, I have a couple of classes. So we have method parameters quiz1 and we have method parameters quiz2. We also have a support class here, which is a person. The person class is a class that we're going to use within our second example. So so let's have a look at the first example. So within my first example, I have a method here, a standard public static void main method, and in it I'm going to declare an integer I, and we're going to assign it a new object, an integer object with the value of 2. The next thing I'm going to do is pass this parameter into a method, and the method is do something with I. And the thing to note when we pass parameters into the methods, what we're doing is we're passing the value of the parameter, and that's what we mean by pass by value in Java. And the value of the parameter is not the object itself. The value of the parameter is the address of the object. Okay, so what gets stored within the parameter itself is not the object, but the address of the object. So when I pass a parameter into a method, what I'm doing is I'm passing the value of that address. And that's what we mean by pass by value in Java. When you're trying to pass an object, what you're actually doing is you're passing the address of the object. So that's what gets passed. That's what gets passed into this parameter here. The address of new integer 2 gets stored within this I integer parameter, so that when I call the print statement here, so since system.out.println line 13 and we're printing I, what gets printed is whatever object I is pointing to. Okay, and that means whatever object whose address is stored within I. So therefore, at the moment within I here, what we've done is we've stored the address of this first object here. So when I print I out, it should print out the number 2. So let's run this example, and you notice here at the bottom within the console, line 13 prints out the number 2. If I do something like this, however, if I say I is equal to new integer 2000, what I've done is I've created a brand new object. So whenever you see the new keyword here, what we've done is we've created a completely new object, and that new object has its own address, which is completely different from the address of the first object here. And when I say I is equal to new integer 2000, what I store within the parameter I here is the address of the second new object. And the thing to note is that this parameter is not the same as this parameter. These are two completely different parameters. The parameter declared in 6 is different from the parameter declared here in line 12. So even though I've said here I is equal to new integer 2000, this first parameter here should continue to point to this object and not to this object. Okay, so if I call the print out method here in line 15, it should print out. So here what we're doing, we're printing I, which is this I, now pointing to this object. Therefore line 15 should print out 2000. As you can see down here in the console, that's what it does. But also you notice that if I call print within the original main method here, so we're printing out I here, which continues to point to this first object, it should print out the number 2. And you notice down here that line 8 does print out number 2. Okay, so that's essentially what happens when you create multiple objects. They each have their own address, and even though sometimes the parameters names are the same, it's important to note that they may be different parameters. Okay, so in our second example, what I do here is I also have a static void main method, and I create, I declare a parameter Ellis, and it's of type person. So it's of the type of this class, which I've created here. And it's a very simple class. It has a simple string, which is the name of the person, a constructor to initialize the name of the person. And then we've got a get name method, which returns the name of the person, and a set name method, which modifies the name of the person. I also have a toString method, which returns a string representation of an object of type person. In this case, the string representation is simply the name of the person. So if we go back to our example, I declare a parameter of type person, and I initialize it to this object here. So I create a new object is equal to new person, and this new person has been initialized. This object of type person has been has one parameter, and that parameter is the name, and it's been initialized to the value Ellis. And I also, as we did in the first example, I also have a method do something with, which I can pass an object of type person. In this case, I've passed the parameter Ellis here, so that's been passed into the object, and that's been passed into here. And as I explained in the first example, what we're doing here essentially is we're passing the address of this object. So the address of this object is being stored within this parameter, and now this address is being passed into this parameter. And so now we have two parameters, a parameter Ellis, and we have a parameter person P, and they both point to the same object, which means that they both store the address of the same object. Okay? And within do something with person P, first thing I do is I print out the contents of P. So I'm trying to print out the object that is pointed to by P. So in this case, it should print out simply Ellis. Okay, and so if I run this example, you notice here line 12 prints out Ellis as it should. And remember, P is an object of type person, and we do have a method within person set name in which we can change the name of the person. So p.setName, for example, I've changed it in this case to Bob. If I then try to print out P, it should print out Bob, and you notice here line 14 does print out Bob as it should. And because we haven't actually created a new object here, when I set the name to Bob, what I've done is I've manipulated the original object. I've not created any new object. So so after line 7, when I call the method, if I go ahead and print out the parameter Ellis, remember both Ellis and P here are both pointing to the same object, which I've been manipulating there. And because I've changed the name within this object to Bob, now Ellis should also print out Bob. So you notice down here that line 8 also prints out Bob as it should.